I have a question for
How about
Scott.
Scott?
Thank
He's
you
the guy
for
that
everything you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Scott, you never talked about a possibility that what's going on in Ukraine is actually a deal between the U.S. deep state and Russia, where Russia can eliminate all the Ukrainian nationalists and then exchange some other favors for U.S. interests. I mean, this is the advice that the U.S. has been giving the Ukrainian army, and you have said this multiple times, and Douglas McGregor and Larry Johnson and all the other analysts said that it's the opposite of the proper advice. And it's just hard to believe that the entire U.S. administration and the Pentagon, that they can be this much off. What do you think about that?
Well, what I would say is this, that Vladimir Putin has been pretty upfront about who he is and what he's done and what his approach has been. And, you know, he said in many interviews, including the interview with Tucker Carlson, that, you know, he was looking to make a deal with the West. He straight up asked Bill Clinton, hey, can we join NATO? I mean, that's the ultimate deal right there. That is the deal of the century. Clinton said, no, you can't. But he kept trying to make deals. He kept, you know, this whole concept of, you know, the relationship he had with the oligarchs was a deal with the West, because the oligarchs were about working with Western interests to take Russian resources out of Russia overseas and enrich themselves. And so he cut a deal with the oligarchs, which is a deal with the West. He continued to cut deals with the West regarding energy, renegotiating, you know, relationships with the big oil and Russia. But every time he entered a deal with the West, he got screwed. Literally, there's not a single time the West actually did what they were supposed to do. Arms control. They had a deal with the West, with the U.S., and we lied. And we pulled out of deals. We pulled out of the ABM treaty. We pulled out of the INF treaty. We pulled out of Open Skies. We lied about New START. And the reason why I bring this all up, I mean, Minsk was a deal with the West. It was a deal with France and Germany, a deal for peace. And he got screwed every single time. So I don't see Vladimir Putin cutting a deal with the deep state. First of all, he doesn't trust the deep state. I mean, he recognizes a reality that the deep state is the only stability in American politics. Presidents come and go, he said, but, you know, presidents can promise anything. But as soon as they're elected, you know, the men with the dark suits and the black ties and the briefcases come in, sit down and read them what the reality is, and that's it. So, you know, I think he understands that the deep state exists, and maybe he even has a token of respect for them, but he doesn't trust them. He doesn't. The Russians don't trust the West anymore, and that's another reason why. Getting back to Navalny, the stupidity of this. I mean, everybody in the West, he's an opposition leader. He can't get any support in Russia because Russia's done with the West. I mean, there's a handful of people out there that are mourning Navalny in Russia and all that, but they're not a politically viable number of them. Putin's going to get 80% support because 80% of Russians like what he's doing. They like the fact that he has, you know, created a Russian national identity. He's created a viable Russian economy. He has, you know, brought the church back into the life of people. You know, and people are proud to be Russian again. They like being Russian, and he's talked about Russia as being a unique civilization. And the Russians who were alive in the 90s, they were like, screw Russia, we don't want to identify as Russian anymore. We want to be like the West. We want to transform ourselves into a Russian version of the West. That was Navalny selling out. Putin said no. And now he's take Russia, they're their own civilization, they're their own culture, and they're damn proud of it. The last thing they want to do is go back to the West. So that's why Navalny was a non-starter in Russia, especially today. But getting back to the question, I can't see Putin making that kind of deal. That might be something that this deep state wants to do, but Putin can't do it. And here's the other thing too. For Putin to do that kind of deal, the deep state would have to be positioned in America to make such a deal viable, meaning that, you know, you can't just go cut a deal and make everybody think you're doing the exact opposite. In America, Russophobia is so deep in academia, which is deep state, in institutions, deep state, in the government, deep state. The whole thing, it just doesn't make any sense that having conditioned all of America to be Russophobic, that you're really cutting a deal that's going to empower Russia down the road. Because eventually you're going to have to sell the deal to people, and you need to prepare the battleground, and they're not. So Russia's not inclined for a deal. Neither is the West. I like the idea, but I just don't think it holds water.
All right, thanks a lot for calling all the way from Serbia.
I appreciate the call, though. Yeah, thanks for calling from Serbia. Appreciate it.
Kaldal from Greece. She didn't like the way you talked to me, by the way, the other day, Scott. I want you to know.
I know. Nobody did. I got in a lot of trouble.
All right. Thank you, Kaldal. Appreciate the love. I believe you reported
Zelensky more, does she?
No, well, Ann made a highlight clip out of it, and most of the comments were really positive. They said, when you're good friends, you can talk to each other like that. So that's the way I feel about it, too. So all's good, Scott, baby. Don't you worry. I believe you reported...
Wait a minute. Jeff, no offense to you. You were listening to that historical monologue, and your eyes were rolling because you're dumber than shit.
All right. I believe...
Delete that, man. Delete it. Come on. That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
No, this is how we express love. It's a little bit sick in a way, but on the other hand, it's just the way it is. I believe you reported Zelensky's polls are fairly high in Ukraine, but not as high as polls of the general he fired. Professor Mearsheimer also reported this. Are the polls true? And if so, how can fairly high polls for Zelensky be true when he is totally throwing his country under the bus?
The problem is every poll has a bias, and polls can be made to say whatever they want, especially in a country like Ukraine that's corrupt. What questions are being asked, et cetera. So, I can't vouch for the quality of the polls or the accuracy of their results. But I agree with you. I mean, it makes no sense. The only thing is that Ukraine doesn't have a free and open media. They put people on death lists for opposing them. It's amazing that happens. And so I do think that you have an audience there that is conditioned to accept at face value what they're hearing from Ukrainian state-controlled media, et cetera. And remember, the war that is on the battlefield, but the Russians haven't really taken the war to the country. Yes, they've blown up some power stations, but they always blew it up in a way, except with some exceptions, where they could be repaired. So it was like a signal. Hey, we can turn the lights out anytime we want, but we don't want you all to freeze to death. So you go ahead and repair that stuff, and we'll let the power come back on and flow. And so in most of Ukraine, life is tolerable, not great, but tolerable, because the war hasn't touched them yet. And so if you can come home and you have heat and you have food and you have running water, and you turn on the TV and you're told that we're winning the war, this is a good cause, the Russians are evil, the West is on our side, hang in there, the European Union's going to let us in, NATO's going to let us in, it's all going to work out in the end. And then they see Zelensky travel. They go on the evening news. Zelensky gets off the airplane in Munich, comes down the stairs, shakes hands, hugs, and they cut out all the bad stuff. And they just see this heroic figure. And, they turn the TV off and go to bed saying, that Zelensky's all right. He's trying hard for the people. They don't know the whole truth. So I think there's a lot of bias built into to this poll.
All right, let's take another phone call. Hi there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector. What is your great question for Scott?
Hello, Scott. My question is the following. Ukraine is a country where the river flows from north to south. And it's very difficult when you are on the offensive to go from east to west, because when you are crossing the river, you are very vulnerable. Do you expect for the end of the war for the Russians to go from north to south, leaving Dnieper River on their right, along the left bank of the Dnieper River for the final offensive? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a familiar voice. How does he get through every time? So he must be
I
paying
don't know.
somebody else.
He has you on speed dial, man. Jeff, I'm gonna have to check your accounts because I think he's sliding you some money under the table to get in every week.
No, I think he's paying.
That's okay. Good job. But look, Vladimir Putin has said that Odessa is a Russian city. Odessa is on the right bank of the Dnieper River. Now, let's just so everybody understands. It's a caller said it's from the river flows from the north to the south. So when we say right bank, it's not like you're looking at a map that is traditionally oriented with north up. Because then you say the right, but this is a mistake I made early on. Me, a military intelligence officer who's supposed to know better, was talking about the right bank when it was really the left bank. So the right bank, your military right, is over here, and but it's not, because the river flows from the north to the south, which means you really have to orient it the other way. So the right bank is actually on the west. The Russians are going to have to cross the river to take Odessa. That's the bottom line. Now, where they cross the river and how they cross the river is another thing. My guess is they're going to cross it probably somewhere in the Zaporizhia area, because that seems to be where the battle is progressing. That seems to be where the collapse is going to take first. So the Russians are going to be able to come in, seize that river, and then rapidly exploit that and get over on the other side, pump in enough stuff, curve up to Kharkov, join up there, and then push down. They're going to be, why do I say that? Because that's sort of what happened in World War II. They had to secure the north and come down and to take it because of the river. But Russia will have to cross the river. Yes, it's difficult, but remember, we're talking about the total collapse of the Ukrainian army as we speak. There's nothing left. These guys are fleeing Avdiivka. They're, thousands of them are caught. They're making a move to try and get into their position, getting slaughtered as they go across the fields. And the few reserves they were able to bring in got hammered with Iskanders, 1,000 dead. They try and bring in whatever ammunition they have left. It's getting hit by the Russians 50 clicks down the road. Tanks come in. They're getting hit by Lancets. You move, you die. You stay in place, you die. The only option for the Ukrainian soldiers right now is death. And it's happening everywhere on the battlefield. They can't maneuver. The second you move, Russia now has, great, surveillance of the battlefield now, because air defense has run out of missiles. And so stuff's operating now without fear of getting shot down. And you move, the Russians bring in drones or artillery, they kill you. You stay in place because you don't have counter battery anymore. The Russians are able to mass artillery, blow the hell out of your position, send the infantry in who don't get repulsed by your artillery, so they kill you. And Russia's just doing this all along the front line right now. It's literally the collapse. And so when that happens, I don't think the Ukrainians are going to be in a position to, defend the river aggressively. They have some weapons that the Russians have to be careful of. I'm still amazed that the Ukrainians can sortie Su-24 fighters that carry the Storm Shadow missiles. When this war is over, I want to know how they did that, because even though they're Ukrainian, they deserve a medal. It's like what I said during the Battle of Mariupol. Ukrainian helicopter pilots actually landed in Azovstal while it was surrounded and evacuated people. And I'm going, how the hell did they do that? That's amazing flying, amazing flying. I don't want the Azov battalion to be withdrawn. I'd like them all to be shot down, but you just got to call it like you see it. If a Ukrainian takes a Mi-8 HIP and flies it over Russian defenses into Mariupol, lands at Azovstal, loads people on, and flies out and gets away with it, give that man a medal, because that is some great That's a great pilot. I want to shake his hand, not because I support his cause, but I just want to shake the hand of a man that can make that mission. I'd like to shake the hand of those Su-24 pilots, because how the hell are they doing this? I mean, Russia's lighting up that airfield all the time. Russia knows where the airfield is. I know most are shot down, but some of them aren't shot down. They still get up and they still fire the storm shadows. So there's something going on here. And the only reason I brought that up is that if Russia starts putting pontoon bridges across the Dnieper River, they're going to have to put up a lot of air defense, because there's some Su-24s out there with storm shadows, and they will try and take down. There's some HIMARS out there that will try and take down. It's not like the Russians are going to get away with murder. The Russians still have to defend. But the bottom line is the capacity for Ukrainians to resist is diminishing on a daily basis. They can't sustain this casualty rate for much longer.
Esther, in the Netherlands, in my country in the 80s, half a million people took to the streets to protest against the placement of nuclear weapons in Europe and the insanity of potential nuclear warfare. Why was the peace movement so much more successful in that time than it is today? And what will it take for people to wake the F up?
Esther, watch your language. Shame on you. This is a PG-13 show. Yes, we don't swear. The inspector's not allowed to swear anymore after he told Jeff a bad word. Look, Esther, I was alive during that time too. And what I'll say is this. In 1982, maybe, there was a movie, ABC put a movie out called The Day After, and it was about nuclear war. Scared the bejesus out of everybody that saw it. Why? Because it was real. What I mean by real is everybody knew we had nuclear weapons, and the Soviets had them and we had them, and we were getting ready to kill each other. So when they saw that, they went, that can happen. That's real. That can really happen to us. Now these idiots are trying to put weapons on our soil, because the Netherlands was picked for being a place where the ground-launched cruise missiles would be. You had Glicken bases, and that meant that you became a nuclear target now. You're not just had nuclear weapons that could fire at the Soviets, but now the Soviets were going to take you out, take the Netherlands out. Goodbye, that's all she wrote. And so the people, rightfully so, went to the street and protested. All of Europe went to the street and protested. Remember how I talk about the million-man march that took place in Central Park? That was Americans saying, no, we don't want to do this, because they believed it was real. We just had a movie last summer, I guess, Oppenheimer, talked about, the father of the atomic bomb and all that. And one of my criticisms of the movie was the whole way they did the whole nuclear thing didn't scare anybody. I mean, people were just going, yeah, okay, atomic bomb. So what? I'm not scared. I'm not frightened. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't think people understand the scope and scale of the threat that they face today. The danger of nuclear war is greater today than it was in the 1980s, when everybody woke up and said, we don't want this to happen. I don't know what it's going to take, because people just stopped believing it's real. Because the Cold War ended, then America was the unilateral power, and we convinced everybody that the Russians weren't a threat, the Chinese weren't a threat, we had nuclear supremacy, nobody's going to mess with us. And everyone went, oh, okay, yeah, we're not worried about, you detargeted the warheads, that's cool. So we don't have to worry about nuclear weapons anymore. And at the time, they're right. It's a cool thing. You have nuclear submarines out there, but they no longer have the launch, they no longer have the targets plugged into the missiles. So in order to use these missiles, not only do you have to get permission to activate and fire them, spin them up, but the targets have to come to you, and you have to program the targets in each one of the missiles. It takes time. And the good thing about time is people get to think and start saying, do we really want to do this? And that was the whole idea, confidence building, buying time, taking away the urgency. One of the reasons why the INF Treaty was so important is that without the INF Treaty, missiles were 5 minutes away from Moscow, which meant if there was an accident, Moscow would go, well, we got to assume it's a full-scale attack. Boom, everybody dies. We got rid of those missiles. We bought time, and that time came in handy. I tell the story about what happened in 1995 when Boris Yeltsin actually had the suitcase opened up with his general staff saying, launch now, because we detected incoming missiles. Launch now, Mr. President. It's all over if you don't. But he had time, and he went, I don't think so. I don't know. Oh, it's just a false alarm. We don't launch. But had it been INF time, he would have had to launch. No choice. Time. Now what we have today is we're back to targeting. Our stuff has targets, and we're bringing it in close to the shore. What people don't understand is when we take an Ohio-class submarine and we bring it in close to the Pacific coast of Russia, if it pops up and it fires its Trident missiles in a low trajectory, the Russians aren't going to detect it with their normal radars. They may not be able to shoot the stuff down, and it's going to be hitting Russian silos or Russian mobile bases, taking out the missiles that Russia is counting on to deter us. So the Russians are scared to death of this stuff. That's why they built Sarmat. That's why they have other systems out there that basically say, if you try to pull that stunt on us, we're going to kill you all. These weapons are front loaded. They're there. They're ready to rock. And nobody cares. Literally nobody. I can't. Jeff knows this. I'm talking till I'm blue in the face about the danger of nuclear war. I'm trying to make a trailer to our movie Waging Peace, and I'm trying to come up with a way to impart the danger of nuclear war. What imagery will do this? But the problem is everybody's seen the imagery already. You know, it's like, oh, that's a nice hydrogen bomb. But we don't use hydrogen bombs. Yes, we do. But they're there. They're loaded. They have targets. They're ready to hit you right now. Do people understand that the way nuclear targeting works is it's not one warhead for one place. It's redundancy. So when it comes in, it's not like you're going to go, oh, boom, there's a mushroom cloud. Wow, well, that's it. No, I'm sorry, guys. It's going to be boom, 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 because it's redundancy. They're coming in with multiple nuclear warheads to make sure they get the job done. It's all she wrote. You're going to die a horrible death. But how do you scare people? I mean, I'll show the imagery, but how do you get it apart that this is real, guys? This is as real as it gets. And, you know, give you another example. I don't know if anybody's going to ask this question, but, you know, I did the 5-minute factual on, you know, Mike Turner and, the controversy over this anti-ballistic missile capability that Russia is allegedly developing, which appears to be a nuclear weapon, put it in space. And people say, well, isn't that a violation of the Outer Space Treaty? Yes, it is. But Consortium News is supposed to be publishing an article I sent to them about this. But, you know, the Outer Space Treaty prohibits not just the deployment of nuclear weapons, but the militarization of space and anything that doesn't promote the purposes of peace. Right now, the United States is in the process of deploying this a new satellite constellation. Hundreds of satellites, small satellites, sort of the military version of Starlink. So you're going to have a whole bunch of satellites surrounding the Earth in low Earth orbit. Why is that important? Hard to target low Earth orbit with your satellite interceptors, because satellite interceptors, the kinetic ones, they have to go up and hit the big bus that's up there, the one that we have in geosynchronous orbit right now. They're going to hit that. But when you have hundreds of small satellites around the Earth, you can't hit them all. And the beauty of the small satellites around there is, if let's say they send one up and they take two out, all we have to do is call up SpaceX and say, hey, load up one of your redeployable missiles. We're gonna take some satellites out of the warehouse, and we're just going to replace them. We're just going to launch and replace. Boom, boom. Sort of like Starlink does, which is fine. But what are these satellites used for? They're used for targeting. They're used for navigation. They're used for military communications. Basically, these satellites enable the United States military to dominate the spectrum of warfare. So if there's a war with Russia, these satellites will enable us to communicate perfectly, navigate perfectly, target perfectly. That's it. Boom. And the Russians, they don't have the ability to do that. So if we get this satellite constellation deployed, we are actually in a position where we could do some damage to the Russians, and they're worried about that. But there's a weakness to these satellites, because the key to these small satellites is they're lightweight. You can put a whole bunch of them into one of these SpaceX things, pop it up there and deploy them. Lightweight. Which means they're not hardened against electromagnetic pulse, EMP. What does a nuclear weapon do? Big time electromagnetic pulse. So what the Russians are doing is saying, hey, you guys are weaponizing space. You're putting these satellites up there, and you're positioning yourselves to basically win the war. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a satellite intercept capability that has a nuclear warhead. And we pop it up and there it goes in outer space. Don't worry, America, the radiation ain't going to kill you. We got the ozone layer. But it's going to fry all the satellites. And suddenly, not only do we lose the capability to win a war, we lose the capability to fight a war. Because everything we do now is linked to satellites. Everything we do. There's not anything we don't do that doesn't have satellite connectivity. And we're just assuming we're going to have this perfect working satellite network. And it's gone instantly. And this is what Mike Turner's worried about. Everybody said he did it because of Ukrainian funding. No, he didn't. He did it because, I don't know, what was the other reason? Ukrainian funding and, FISA. That's the one I heard. FISA. Why the hell would he do it for FISA? No, he did it because we've been sitting on this intelligence for a while. It's something that was developed, I think last year sometime. I'll get to that in a second. But we've been sitting on it. And everybody knows that Russia's developing this capability that will eliminate a constellation that costs $14 billion so far. It'll cost more. It's a lot of money. But it's not just the money. It's the fact that everything is dependent upon it. We're literally building the drug that we have to be addicted to maintain. And the Russians have found the counter to it. So we think we're getting high on heroin or something. The Russians are coming in with the Narcan. You ain't getting high. Well, we want to get high. Well, you can't because I just hit you with Narcan. The Russians nullified this. So Turner's sitting there going, two things, guys. One, why are we spending all this money putting in a system that the Russians have the easiest counter to? And knowing that we're committing suicide doing this. We're putting in something that's supposed to make us stronger, but we actually have created our Achilles heel. And if the Russians pop this thing off, we're going to die. We're going to lose that war. Why are we doing this is the thing. And then the other question is, what are we going to do about it? Now that the Russians have this capability, we need a replacement communication structure for these damn hot air balloons. All right, Patterson, I like your thinking, man. But that's actually pretty brilliant. But so that's what he did. So because he released his statement on Wednesday, knowing that on Thursday that the White House is going to meet with the Gang of Eight to talk about this. But the Gang of Eight doesn't talk about this with anybody. The Gang of Eight's a bunch of sellouts. The Gang of Eight just sit there and nod their heads and they don't do anything. And Turner's saying, we have to do something now. We have to respond to this, come up to a solution, either a diplomatic work, arms control with the Russians or find an alternative, but we have to do something. All you guys are doing is sweeping it under the rug. And that's why he came out. Wednesday is when the Pentagon launched 2 more satellites as part of this constellation, 2 research and development satellites about detecting ballistic missile launch. But if we can, they went up, we're going to start testing them and all that. If they work, then we're going to put a whole bunch more. And that's our missile defense system. Remember, we don't militarize space. Well, we're militarizing it right there. And the Russians are saying, we're just not playing that game, guys. We got this capability and, but here's the deal. The Russians never admitted they had the capability. The fact is they called it fantasy. They said, this is all fantasy. Turner was asking for the release of what they call raw intelligence. That means it's not a finished intelligence product. A raw intelligence is if I tap into your phone and I get fragments of conversation and I write up the report. Scott Ritter called Jeff Norman and said, your dog's breath is really bad. And so there it is. Your dog's breath is really bad. What didn't happen is somebody took that and said, what's the dog's name? Maverick. Does he have a history of dental problems? So they can say Maverick, a 4-year-old, Pomeranian with a history of dental problems has bad breath. And Scott Ritter said, your dog has bad breath. That's finished intelligence. Now this isn't finished intelligence. This is just straight up a conversation. And what's important about that? Well, Jeff and I know that when we had a conversation on Thursday night last week, he said, your dog has bad breath. We know that. So now if we get an intelligence report that says the dog might have bad breath, we're going, how did that get out there? Somebody listened to our phone conversation last Thursday. And so here, Turner has released raw intelligence, hasn't had a chance to get processed and cleaned up, raw intelligence, and the Russians are going, hey, when did we have that meeting about this capability? Who was at that meeting? How did they communicate? Track that all down because the Americans are listening. Change everything. Guess what? We're not. At a time when Mike Turner's trying to get everybody to pay attention to this, we're never going to get another piece of intelligence on this. Not for a while. Maybe not ever. Dumber than dirt. At a time when we actually need the intelligence, we need to know what the Russians are thinking. Are they actually going to deploy this system? You haven't, Mr. Man, you haven't smelled Maverick's breath lately. It don't smell like roses. It smells like those little green things, though. You know, the ones you give dogs for their breath. We give him that, so he's okay. But there's a reason why they call it dog breath. Maverick's the reason. But anyways, poor Maverick. He's mad at me now. Mike Turner did. It's a criminal act what he did, literally. I know he was thinking he was doing the right thing, but it's a criminal act. He may have cost us